Hello.
Hey, what's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, man. How's your day so far? Pretty
Good.
good?
Yeah, just picked the kids up from school and
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah, my
yeah,
wife's off to do that right now.
nice.
Yeah.
It's we just got settled in a new house, so it's been an adjustment,
Oh,
but like
nice.
this is their I think third week of school now and they're settling in nicely and
Oh,
yeah,
that's great.
it's nice. My wife
Where are you now?
I'm in Mansfield, Texas. So
Oh, you are? Okay.
yeah, I'm
Oh,
it's
look good. I have.
whoa, Bucky's. When did you get
Just
that?
a buddy left it who's from Texas, left it here. And I had my first experience with Bucky's
Wow.
recently, and I was like, this place is awesome.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
clean. Yeah. Yeah.
It's yeah, they're actually building a Bucky's near me. The all the Bucky's that are like closest to me are maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours away. So they're building one closer, so I'm really excited.
Oh,
Um
that's cool.
but yeah, I lived out in LA for a while and now I'm
Yeah.
from Fort Worth originally and moved
Yeah.
back home. It was I was out in LA for like 10 years and it wasn't gaining any traction. So I was like, whatever, I'm moving home. I met my wife. I started teaching acting and was, um, just kind of felt stuck and didn't really know what direction to go. And then
Yeah.
the series that I'm on now happened and they actually shoot that now we moved closer, but it was an hour from my house where they were shooting.
Yeah.
And out of all places, like they were shooting this show just an hour from me, and now we're 20 minutes
Isn't it
away from
wild?
set. So
I feel like it's so different. Like back when I started, it had to be New York or LA. Like it just had to be.
yeah,
Everything's changed so much and everything is remote,
yeah,
you know, post COVID, everything, which I kind of miss. I miss kind of being around people and that sort of thing. And we'll talk about that. But
yeah. It is weird. I think that that's one. Like COVID. There was so much bad that came with all of that, and I do think that that's one change that I think will ultimately benefit everyone is that the industry is now not as like you said, it's not just the coasts; it's all over.
no, no.
Taylor Sheridan is down here in Texas shooting like 10
I know.
shows. Like it's
I know. I was in Oklahoma recently and they had like 10 productions going on there, you
yeah,
know?
Oklahoma's like booming right
Yeah,
now.
I know.
Um, I want to talk about like all of your projects and stuff, but I want to before rewind a little bit.
Sure.
And I want to figure out like how you got there. So one big
Okay.
thing I want to hear about your childhood. I know from other interviews
Yeah.
that you grew up in a rough neighborhood and had divorced parents and all of
Yeah.
that. So like what's just kind of like the rundown of what your childhood looked like, and then we can go from there.
Oh man. So I don't want to throw my parents under the bus or anything. They
Of
were
course.
fantastic. You know what I mean? Like they did, like parents just do the best they can. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I feel like generationally, that generation, they didn't have a lot of tools. And I think they just kind of didn't deal with stuff, and they kind of compartmentalized and they didn't talk about things the way we talk about right now, which I think is such a gift, man. Like, when you told me about this, I was like, this is wonderful. And I think the thing is that now we're kind of celebrating each other's vulnerabilities, whereas before that was unheard of. It was
Yeah.
this stoic attitude and this this mask we wore for the public, even though we were maybe falling apart inside. And I think that's oh man, it's just great. It's
Yeah.
really wonderful. And so, growing up, it was hard. I mean, my like I said, I love my parents very much, and they loved me incredibly. And I'm doing a bunch of prefacing here. You know what I mean? And I'm not somebody who really regrets my past, any of that. Like I've really made peace with it, and I feel like I've finally realized as a human being, like how my experience can benefit other people. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And how my limp, in a way, has become my asset. Um, and so, you know, my dad was a compulsive gambler and an alcoholic, and my mother was an alcoholic and most likely bipolar. Was probably not diagnosed at the time. But we grew up really poor. I have a brother and a sister, and we grew up really poor. And my dad, because of his gambling addiction, I was doing the math a few years ago, and I think we moved from the time I was like in fifth grade to the time I graduated from high school. We moved maybe 21 times, 21 or 22 times, and all within Dade County in certain areas. But my dad had this situation where, it was just this, it was a wild experience, man. It was, I think he'd just get in debt somewhere and have to skip, and have to get out of Dodge quick. And so we go from these rentals to this and that. The lights were cut off all the time. A lot of the time, not all the time, but quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my dad was a guy who just, he never had a bank account. He never had a credit card. He had what he had in his wallet or in his pocket.
Hmm.
And it was just a different culture. My dad's Cuban,
Hmm.
and he came over here in '59, right before Castro took power. And I think there was just a big, it was wild. There was a lot of expectations on my dad, to come here in America, being in exile, that whole community. I feel like in many ways it was just terrible, a lot of things that happened. And for this particular group of people, home was literally 90 miles away. My dad used to take a ferry from Key West to Havana, you know.
Wow.
And I think that was really heavy on him, and he, for 25 years, was not able to see his mom or his sisters. So that environment was very heavy and loaded. There was a lot of people in that, in the area. And there was also this very stoic attitude where it's like, a man is a man does this, and a man does this, and a man doesn't talk about his problems. And, God forbid anybody go to therapy, and, but there was a lot of faith, and there were really amazing things too. But it was a really, the area was really violent at the time, because I grew up kind of during the '80s, and it was like the cocaine cowboy times, and everything
Yeah.
you kind of hear, a lot of that was true. It was really a scary time. It was really violent, and you never knew when something was going to pop off. And I think I just constantly walked around with this kind of hum of anxiety, you know,
Hmm.
my entire life. And I think that was, I'm a product of my environment, and also maybe I inherited it, but I think my thing was like I've always had this kind of underlying anxiety, you know, when is something going to go wrong? When is the other shoe going to drop? When are they going to get the lights cut off? All these things. When are we going to have to move again? Who am I going to have to meet at this new school? And I think for a kid, you're just kind of trying to find some footing. And it was really hard for me to find some footing. Meanwhile, my father was this, he was this incredible guy, and he was this magical dude. I mean, he really just like, I know I get a lot of what I am from my dad, and like this love for acting and storytelling, because my dad was just this incredible storyteller. He's so charismatic. And, we'd go into one of these little markets, like a little bodega, and my dad would have, he'd owe them money and somehow have 20 people gathered there, all cracking up, and everyone forgot about the tab, by the time we had left. And he had this just insane charisma about him. And, men loved him, or, and women loved him, and it was just this incredible personality. And, we did things like fishing, and, when we didn't catch anything, we'd eat the bait. My dad was this really good cook, so, we just fished with calamari, and, we didn't catch anything. My dad made really great squid and rice, and it was fantastic. And there was something really just kind of, the love was always there, and there was a warmth. And I slept in bed with my brother and my dad till I was, 15, 16 years old.
Yeah.
It was just something, we're just so close.
Yeah.
So, but amidst that, like, um, there was just a lot of fear, and there was a lot of people, with a lot of stuff to prove. And there was, we had one of the biggest ports, as in the country, and
Hmm.
cocaine was just prevalent, and so was violence, and so were guns, and so were these, and so I was in this environment where I felt like, men don't smile, they don't laugh, it's business. And I just, that wasn't me. It went contrary to everything I felt like I was,
Yeah.
and I
I
was
want
someone who,
I want
yeah,
to ask about that because I
sorry for the long-winded
no,
response.
no, no, I love that.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on a few things and let you continue, but like I I grew up, just in Fort Worth, Texas. It was, not a necessarily dangerous place or anything, but there was
Yeah.
still a little bit of the, like toxic masculinity, and like there were.
Yes.
Again, I love my parents, but I grew up with divorced parents at a very young age, and my mom's very avoidant. She's super, super like supportive of everything and believes like
Sure.
without her, I would have zero belief in myself. Like she's the one when no one else believed that I could do the things that I want to do. She's the one that was like, you could be an
Champion.
astronaut, you could do anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like tough feelings, it's like, oh, everything's okay. Everything's going to be good. Like, and it's
Yeah.
like, would just kind of like, avoid, like say whatever you need to say to make the people around you happy, and everything's
It's a
good.
fear.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and then my dad was a Marine cop, lawyer. Now he's
Oh, wow.
into politics, very authoritative.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it was so there was a lot of like with him, I couldn't really open up emotionally either because again, men don't do that. It's like you got to dry
Yes.
it up, don't cry, like.
That's right.
And in school, I started to get picked on. There was some, violent um, things happening. There were school fights. Kids were picking on me. It turned
Yeah.
like physical, and I got in some physical like altercations. And then over time, I was like, "This isn't me." Like when there's a conflict,
Yes.
my reaction is not to punch someone or
Right.
scream at them. So
Yeah.
I eventually was like, okay, I've got to start making fun of myself before they do. I've got to
Yes.
start uh, being like just super open and like either I can either deflect by being funny or by being like
Yes.
super emotionally available for people. And like, but then there's the
Absolutely.
pressure of being that person. And it's like, so do you relate to any of that?
Absolutely. No question. I was a clown. I told jokes and I would deflect by, and absolutely I was the guy that everybody came to when they had some major issue. I was like, I guess, kind of therapist for, which was really, really cool because
Yeah.
I really got to know people. But, you tell me this story, and I think that's the thing that's so wonderful that I've kind of discovered as I've gotten older. I think my story was so unique. I've always thought, oh, it's so unique. You know what I mean? And like, and it made me feel like an outsider. And like hearing you, like it's all relative. You know what I mean? Like we've all experienced this stuff, many, many of us. And it's
Yeah.
so great that we're talking now because, when I discovered that I had anxiety or whatever it was, I didn't even know I had it. I didn't, there wasn't a word for it really. People did not talk about it. And remember, we like had a phone book and I didn't know, what to, we, there's something about our generation now, like that is just really wonderful and it's so exciting. And my kids talk about like I'm feeling a little anxiety. I'm like, oh, okay, well, what's
Yeah.
going on? And they have that word, and I didn't like. None of us had that word. I don't think when we were growing up.
No.
Uh, to like put, you know what I mean? Like to put
Yeah.
like into, which is so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
About,
The language around emotions has expanded so much
oh my
in the
goodness,
last like decade or so, and um it's really like been incredible to. And like you said, I really appreciate you being like, I don't want to throw my parents under the bus, because I've had that same fear on the podcast talking about
yeah,
experiences. But those things that you discover, it's like it I haven't ever felt any animosity or resentment towards them because I know they were doing their best. And if anything, it makes me appreciate them more because I'm like, now I'm grateful for all of those things that I learned, so I can, make the adjustments and tweaks for my own kids. And I have this language I can use, like around what they're feeling. Like, are you feeling invalidated? Are you feeling insecure or anxious or whatever? And that it's okay. Like every time my kids cry, we always say like it's okay to cry. Like you can cry. We
oh
can't hit
yeah,
each other, but like
yes,
don't hit
right.
your sister, but like you
Yeah,
can cry. That's fine.
uh huh.
And I think that
Is it the
that's
younger one hitting the older one typically,
no.
or
So
is
it's interesting. I think So we have three. We've got our oldest girl who's 9, our middle girl
Okay.
who's 6, and our son who's 4. Um,
Oh, we have
and
the same. I've got 9 and 5. We're
wow,
right in the same.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
they're the best. I mean, it's interesting
Um,
though. The oldest is, I think there's a little bit of like competitiveness with her little sister because she feels
sure.
like that ruined our dynamic of like, just her and her
Yeah.
parents. So
Yeah.
they're best friends, but they're always like, as soon as we get in the car, their car seats, we have the three
Bigger.
row.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
it's like bickering in the car, all this stuff, like, competing over who gets the iPad or who gets a toy, whatever it is.
Anything. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but they're like best friends. Our middle is the like people pleaser. I'm a middle child too, so it's like, um
Yeah.
I relate to her in the sense of like people pleasing, trying to avoid conflict,
Oh yeah.
sometimes to a fault where I'm like, hey, you can stand up for yourself, like
Yes.
things that I wish I would have done more as a kid.
Yeah.
And she has lately, my wife and I have noticed there's some times like, because her little brother is just a little like Tasmanian devil. He'll see them like playing with a toy, and you'll see him across the room. He'll stop what he's doing and be like, "I'm going to take that toy," and then he just because he wants to mess with them, and then
Yeah. Right. Right.
he'll take it to destroy their peace. And um, but it's interesting because lately, the last like month or so, our middle has been like really like standing up for herself and like
Oh,
taking the
good.
toy back, and like we'll let it go on for a minute because we're like we'll do it, and she'll at one point she like pushed her sister down who was like trying to take something from her, and the oldest looked at us and was like, "Are you going to get mad at her?" And we're like, "She was defending herself. Like you've got to. She's not just going to take it forever." And
That's
she's
right.
starting to show it. So, but
That's like my
it's
little one's doing right now. She's gotten
really,
tough. Yeah, she's gotten tough because of her big sister,
hmm
which is great.
they got to
I
be.
want my kids to have a little grit. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
It's important,
yeah. The grit and the sensitivity, the both of
and the
those things.
sensitivity.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's equanimity. It's all a balance, man. And it's so funny we're talking about the kids. And I think that's the thing that has created this like deep well of empathy for my parents. You know
Yes.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And sympathy for them and understanding and
Yeah.
it's not easy. It's not always easy. And you do your best, with what you got.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of I mean, they need attention constantly. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it's wonderful. And as it's like the best thing we've done. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like if I had to, what have you done that's really incredible? I had my girls, that's it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Easily, you
It,
know?
I want to ask, like, regarding becoming a parent, like, so I listened to your episode of Anna Faris's podcast, and I loved
Oh
it.
yeah.
It was great.
Okay.
And you mentioned like feeling if there's a big thing that happens, if someone came in with a gun or whatever, you feel prepared. You feel capable
Yes.
of making a decision and being like, this is what I need to do to protect myself, to get out of this. Like you feel like you can go into action, versus the panic thing, the anxiety,
Unbelievable.
like. And I think that I relate to that so much. I had my wife and I came across years ago, like 10 years ago, before we had kids or anything, came across this young man who survived, thankfully. But we had come up on the aftermath of this accident, and
Yeah.
his car ripped in half, and he was still strapped into a seat, but fully exposed to the street as his car rolled. He was missing a leg,
Oh my
and
goodness.
the other leg, there was bones. It didn't look real, and it was.
Yeah.
I was really surprised after. That was one of the most gruesome thing I've seen in person, and I went into like action mode. I was like, okay, this
That's
is what we
right.
got to do. Really decisive,
Yep.
and I felt proud afterwards. But then, um, and I've always kind of taken that approach. I think having medical issues, like in near death experiences, I was always kind of like,
Yeah.
well, I gotta do something. I gotta like figure this out. Like, there wasn't really room to, or time to like freeze. Like you had to kind of
Right.
spring in action. But when it comes to the emotional stuff, because I think of my upbringing and like the lack of availability when it came to like talking about emotions,
Yeah.
sometimes there is that like, even like the last week, I had a conversation with my therapist about this, that like I consciously have always been like, oh, I have no resentment towards my dad for like, you know, not for not trusting me or getting mad at me over this thing or whatever. Like I don't feel I can look at it and be like, oh yeah, that wasn't a good thing that he did, but like,
Intellectually, yes.
yeah, but I'm like, I'm fine. I don't feel angry or resentment. And then as we talked about it, I was like, oh wait, even though consciously I'm not feeling angry at my mom or dad, I still feel like there was trauma from certain things that happened
Well,
that,
the body keeps score, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
The
and it
body,
rears its head when I least
yeah,
expect it, or when I don't even realize it's rearing its head.
yeah.
Um, so I'm curious, what have been like, especially since becoming a parent, that's kind of when we start being really introspective and trying to figure out like why are we the way we are and why were our parents the way they were.
Yeah.
What have been some of those realizations for you, like those moments of like when you're feeling panicked or anxious, like have you been able to kind of trace that thread back and be like, oh, that's like the specific thing, or like, yeah, I'm curious what some of your,
Absolutely, absolutely now, and I
yeah.
think the thing that's been really just, huge for me is I started meditating a few years ago,
Mhm.
about 4 years ago, and I meditate. I probably sit for an hour a day, and I have to because my mind is always all over the place, and I used to think that these panic attacks and stuff like that came out of the blue, but they didn't. You know, there is a line to it. And there's just like, I'm somebody who has to be the gatekeeper of their thoughts
Yeah.
because and I can only feed myself healthy thoughts and stay in the light. You know what I mean? Like, it's really important. And really, like, it is a switch, you know? And it's this thing where I remember early on when I was in New York, I'd have these panic attacks and I just remember thinking, I don't know how to control them. They come out of the blue. It's this really just, and they would, and it was this, and I know now it was this feeling of being trapped and not being able to get out. And also people with like PTSD, you know, um, which why I have a ton of sympathy for our parents' generation because they were people who went to war. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't understand what that would be like. I can't even imagine what that kind of trauma and does to a person. And so there's a lot of understanding for them as well. Um, but you know, it's all relative. It's all relative, and we all have stuff. And I think that I guess in an answer to your question, which was basically like, can I trace it? Yes, absolutely. But that's also an intellectual thing. And so I think there has to be this real experiential thing for me where for years had to just say, create these new neural pathways where I'd kind of put myself in situations, social situations used to really just kind of drive me nuts. I'm not into small talk. You know what I mean? And there are these things that I think as I get older, I understand about myself and I accept about me, you know? And it's the more self acceptance and acceptance of others, really. And knowing, if I'm in a party and somebody's talking about politics or something like that, I'm not really into politics. You know what I mean? Like, I know that I can only do what I can do. You know what I mean? And I love people. I can be kind. You know what I mean? I can do the things that privately that I do to help others. You know what I mean? But like beyond that, I can excuse myself now. And it's not a big deal. Whereas before I think I felt, as people pleasers, as we
Yeah.
get into these situations where we feel like I have to listen to you right now. You know what I mean? And I'm in my head, I'm having a panic attack looking at you right now and listening to you because you're just so self-involved. I mean, and
Yeah.
in LA, it's nuts.
Yeah.
And you go on and on and on with someone and it's just time maybe to walk away or excuse yourself and take a walk or, close your eyes for 5 minutes. On set, it's something that I do quite a bit, and people just know I'm meditating. I'm not being rude and I'm not worried about what it's just something I do. I get in my chair and I just kind of meditate.
Yeah.
And in between takes makes me kind of more available and more present. And when I do have those moments with others, I feel like they're more profound and rich and real, and authentic.
Yeah.
And it's not me just playing this role. Like I like, like I know that picking this thing up was a way to escape in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
and to be these different people. I've met so many different people. I'm so curious about people and life, you know? And so I know that's what kind of attracted to me. Other, you know, and also needing attention, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
Um, but I think long-winded answer is that I think I'm able to see, you know, I'm quicker to see what I know is going to lead me down some sort of rabbit hole and avoid that, you know,
yeah,
and say, you know, with love, man, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I love you, but I gotta go, you know, this
yeah.
isn't my party, you know? And
I
so,
it's so interesting the thought that like so many actors, because myself included, we got into this industry as a way to, in large part, as a way to like hide ourselves or to put a mask on or to
yeah,
pretend like we're someone else or whatever it is because we're running away from those insecurities, those things that we're wrestling with. And then as adults, like as we get older, as parents, and just also with life experience, I've started to kind of settle into like I love how much this industry now teaches me about myself, and it's made me feel
yeah.
more comfortable being my authentic self. And it's
It's school of life, man. It's
yeah,
school of
yeah,
life. I mean, how blessed are we to like
yeah,
have this, to do this,
yeah.
you know?
And it's one of those things that like I again totally agree with the idea that like I don't regret anything that's happened in my life, and I'm when it comes to like this industry in particular, the roles that I miss out on and things that before would have really like they did bother me and I'd
Yeah.
obsess over it.
Yeah.
And now I'm so grateful because like, at one point there was a 6 or 7 year span and I booked nothing at all. And the one thing I
Yes.
booked in that span
Been there.
was a national commercial that I was cut out of because my limp was too noticeable. And it's like this kind of stuff that like, it makes you want to throw in the towel, but for whatever reason, we love it so much we can't stop. And then eventually, you kind of you get lucky and you get that thing. And it's like now, um, for me, it's that same thing. Like before on a set, my at the front of my mind, it was like give the director exactly what they want. Give the like you have to be there for
Yes.
all the actors. You have to make everyone like you. Um,
Man,
and
it's a lot of work, dude.
it's yeah, it's
A
exhausting.
lot of work.
And then once I think a big part of it is like again the experience. Like the show I'm on now, I'm so comfortable with this group of people, and they're my best friends. Like we are so it's so easy to work with one another at this point. But it's helped me so much on other jobs since I've been on this
Yeah.
one, where I've found myself on set and I'm like I'm not on the entire time. I'm not performing when we're in the
Right.
cast tent or
Oh,
trying to like become best friends with everyone. Naturally you develop friendships, but it's more like
yeah.
I'm here to do a job and I'm going to do what I need to do to best
Oh,
do that
man.
job.
I remember coming home sometimes and telling my wife, like, I'd get these migraines from smiling so much. And I
Yeah.
remember telling my wife, "Oh my god, like, my face hurts," because I have felt like I had to put on I was the happy, fun guy, joy "Hey, hey," you know what I mean? "And what do you want me to be now?" "I'll be that," "and I'll jump through hoops," and you really have to have a different relationship, not just with that, but I think with the business on the whole, because really, like, what this business can become many times, and I've told people about this, is that like it can be an abusive father, that tells you you're good sometimes, and tells you to stay on course. And if you're a bad boy, I'll let you go for a while,
Yeah.
really let you suffer, you know? And so, you know, like the business isn't my daddy anymore. It's not my daddy. You know what I mean? It's like, and I think that comes with, some life experience and stuff like that. And man, I got to talk about faith. I
Yeah.
really have to talk about faith because honestly, I feel like that really saved my life. Is that like, knowing, I remember somebody talking to me about God, and not religion, but to have God, and
Yeah.
religion is fantastic too. I think structure and all these things it gives people and me, but I think for me, it was just knowing that I remember somebody pulled me aside and just said, the way you look at your children, you know what I mean? the way you look at them and love them unconditionally. You know what I mean? I get choked up, you know?
Yeah.
It was like, that's the way God sees you, you know? And for some reason, man, it just clicked. It clicked. And I was like, man, I'm enough, you
Yeah.
know? I'm enough. And I'm enough. It's okay, you know? And I'm loved, and I don't have to jump through all these hoops all the time. I don't have to be this and that and the other thing. Like, it's okay, Melvin. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Just to be Melvin. And that was a rough name to grow up with, too, in a Cuban area, because it was weird. It was just such a weird thing. Like, my whole life, it was like I wasn't Cuban enough. I wasn't white enough. You know what I mean? My
Yeah.
last name was Rodriguez, you know, and, people constantly want to put you in a file. You know what I mean? And so you can't put yourself in one,
No.
just
That's
so,
beautiful. That really hit close to home because it was that same thing. I wasn't disabled enough or I was too disabled. It was that like
yeah,
in the industry, the one role that I got really close to that I didn't get was Breaking Bad, which we've got a connection
um,
there with Better Call
yeah,
Saul. And it was one that like I wasn't disabled enough, like
right,
where there's certain things it was for Walter Jr. And I now there's a like I love what you said about how the way you see your children, like where there's literally nothing your child could do that would make you not love them. They could do the
nothing.
worst thing in the world. I would
Yeah,
visit my kid in prison every single day, like whatever it
absolutely.
is. And
Yeah,
my love, I may be sad that they made a decision
uh,
that led them there, but I would love them the same regardless. And I I've had to come to that realization with myself too, and my relationship with God as well, where I'm the same way. Where I'm not a super religious person, but I
no,
definitely
yeah,
have my own spiritual journey, and I'm on a show that's about Jesus and the apostles, so
right,
it's been really really therapeutic, kind of like going through some of these scenes that like everyone knows about, like some these big miracles and like these the walking on water and like all this stuff, getting to
epic.
like
Yeah,
act it out is has been wild. But there's one scene
yeah,
I want to send you after this because I feel like it'll resonate based on what you just said about like you're enough. There's a scene where so they took my character and they made my own disability part of my character, and uh now I'm an apostle that one of the 12 apostles that has a physical ailment that isn't healed, and it's something that like I love that they went that direction of like how do we deal with that, how do we because there's all these other people getting healed. And a few seasons ago we had a really big scene where Jesus is sending us all out two by two to go heal and preach and all this stuff. And I confront him afterwards and I'm like, hey, you want me to heal people and you haven't healed me yet. Like, what's up with that? And it's this really beautiful scene where he's essentially saying, like, think of the story you have if I don't heal you. Think of the thing only you have that no one else does. And it was like filming that scene was I can't even put into words how emotional it was, like just kind of
man, like just hearing it right now,
yeah,
I'm
I'll as
I'm
soon
a
as we get off.
softie, man. I'm quick to like start to, oh God, and that's the thing, man. That's the gift, and we
Yeah,
realize that that's the gift is that we realize how like our experience is such this rich tapestry of and how to help others and be of service
yeah,
and to remind people you're not alone. You know
yeah,
what I mean? And hey,
and
me too.
yeah, exactly. Even this,
Yeah,
like this is church to me. Like this is a
yeah.
we're able to like totally different like parts of the country, different upbringings, but like there's so many things that tie us together and that are like it's these kind of conversations are so important because it connects all of us. It's
And that's what I've always that's I think that us, as actors, especially as performers and stuff like that, I think that's always what we wanted. I know I always wanted
yeah,
connection. And I sought it through like, all kinds of things, you know what I
yeah,
mean? And ultimately, like that's the thing that's not going to fill the well. It's not going to fill the well, you know? It's
right,
not going to fill the well. What's going to fill the well is this, and
yeah,
finding that in my work, and in everything I do, not just my work, but everything, as a human being. And
yeah,
so it is church, man, because I know, like, here's the thing. I think that's the thing is like, I see you and I see all these other people, and like people I just come in contact with, and I think as before, I think it would get really judgmental and stuff like that, as you know we do.
Yeah.
But I think there's this part of me now that I love that's able, not all the time, but most of the time, no matter who you are, what your background is, or whatever, I'm able to look you in the eye and see this person's cried, you know,
Mhm.
this person was a baby once, you know, this
Yeah.
person had a parent and they felt, you know, neglected, maybe in some, and it doesn't matter who you are, you
Yeah.
know, we've all had these very human experiences that make us all so much more similar than we think we are, you
Mhm.
know? And we have all kinds of ways of separating ourselves from groups and this and that right now. And, you know, the more I can find that connection with others, I think, you know, the happier I am and the more joy I bring to life. You know, that's the deal. And I think that's what I thought was so wonderful about your podcast.
Well,
Because I
thank you.
think I know that's part of what you're doing here, you know?
I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. I think it just it creates like fertile ground for empathy too, because the more you kind of step back and try to think of like, oh, what this person has been through this, or this could explain why this person is so angry or short all the time or whatever.
Yes.
It's just like it's such a happier way to view the world, and to
My
like
goodness.
you don't take things as personally. And
Yes.
that's one thing my mom did teach me a lot, was like during the time of me being bullied, I never felt angry at the bullies. I felt like hurt by their words, but I always
Yeah.
felt really sad for them because I knew that they were likely being bullied at home or had been bullied before. Um, and yeah, I think that it's important to kind of get that. You never know what someone's been through, and I think
No.
with you, like, specifically, like, that's a good segue. I wanted to talk about, leading up to you finding more traction in this industry. You had to you were essentially homeless for a while. So, like, what was
Yeah.
that whole, like, could you kind of touch on, like, that journey of, like, going from that to then, Last Man on Earth and all of the other great things that you've done?
You know, it's a journey, dude, as you know, and I've seen it. I feel like I've been around long enough to see it all. You know, I've seen the guys that kind of like, you know,
Yeah.
suddenly they're, you know, they're on the cover of Rolling Stone, you know, they do one gig and that was not my story. And so, you know, and and I always tried, you know, I was my dad was always somebody who taught me not to compare and despair. You know, that
Mhm.
was also something that was like, you know, look, you know, everybody, if you want that, you've got to take it all. You don't just get to have the nice stuff there. You know, you've got to have everything that comes with it. You know, because the drug dealers in town, like you'd see the cars, you'd see the flash, you'd see the this, and my dad would always say, you know, it's king for a day.
Yeah.
You know, like you get that, you got to take the prison time that is
Yeah.
probably, you know, and so you know, it was you'd get these kind of guest stars, and you know, as you know, you'd like live off of that, and you do this, and you know, I played a lot of cops. You know, for
Mhm.
some reason, I grew up with this guy, and he'd always play the bad guys, and I would always play the cop. Um, and so I played a lot of cops. I remember, um, and you know, I just always, no matter what, and I ate a lot of ramen, and I lived in all kinds of, you know how we do, man. Like
Yeah.
we're
Hot Pockets.
But I knew there was no other alternative. I think the thing was for me that was like kind of a saving grace is I remember I was in New York this one time and I was so frustrated. I was just like, man, what's going on? And this and that. And I was doing theater and I was doing really good theater and I just couldn't make it work, you know? And I woke up this one morning and I was like, I heard this kind of thing, you know, that little voice inside that was like, you're an actor, you know? And I knew that's what I am. I'm an actor. And I knew you're always going to be an actor, you know, thick or thin, whatever. It's just what you do. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so I think there was something that was really kind of liberating with that because I was just like, okay, look, this is just part of the thing. And I think I also had this deep rooted thing and drive that said, I'm not giving up. You know what I mean? I'm not going back home with my tail between my legs. And you know, it was different. It was this whole thing where, like we talked about, it was New York, L.A., and going home was a different thing 20 years ago. You know what I mean? It was like, you know, you go home and you know, you marry your high school sweetheart and become a plumber if you're lucky, or something like that, which is fantastic. It's great.
Yeah,
There's nothing
yeah.
wrong with that. I had a dream.
Mhm.
And, and I just kept telling myself, I know one day, you know what I mean? I know one day. And I just kept, doing stuff. And everybody was like, he's just fantastic. And he just isn't. And we talked about like, there's so many variables and not taking things personally and knowing that sometimes you're not thin enough or not tall enough or not, maybe you're something or too good of an actor. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? I mean, there's all of these variables that go into this thing that are completely out of our control, And so I just kept telling, I kept the kind of the evidence was constantly there. You know what I mean? He went up for this, but he didn't get that, and they're going to make an offer to so and so, who's this like really great actor. And then there was part of me was like, wow, it's just pretty amazing to be considered in that same thing with him.
mhm.
And I was like, that's pretty cool. And then one day, you know, it's just weird, man. Like everything just lines up. It's like all this track you've laid for years. And and you never know, like, it's like that drop in the water. You don't see the rings. You don't know what the rings are doing. You know what I mean? They're doing all kinds of stuff that is beyond your control, you know, but the rings are happening and have faith in the rings.
Yeah,
So I think I always kind of had a little faith in the rings. And I knew that, even though I was homeless, you know, that it would, but I mean, the story was basically, my wife and I were told that it just wasn't, I needed a break. It was time to maybe go home and stay with mom in North Carolina. She was living in North Carolina at the time. And we didn't have it. You know what I mean? Like we just didn't have it. It was me and my girlfriend, my wife now,
yeah,
but my wife then, girlfriend then. And, I was in between gigs and I was coming really close to stuff. And I was like, all right, God, well, tell me what to do. I think this is the thing I got to do. I'll do it. And I just, we got on the road and I love to drive. We've been driving for, got on the road and we're heading towards North Carolina. And I remember, we were at, Hot Springs, Arkansas. We were in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And I pulled in and I was really feeling like I had been told about this show. It was a show for HBO called Getting On.
yeah,
And I'd been told that it had gone away, that they really loved you and you were really in the running. But like, and it was just this last thing. I was like, oh my goodness, really could have used that gig. And so I get to Hot Springs, Arkansas. And I remember we're pulling in and this guy, pay $2 for parking. And, I come in, I give him like $2. And he was like, how you doing, man? And I said, it's been kind of a rough day. And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, you got to take the bitter with the sweet, brother. And I thought that was just so profound at the time. I thought, that's right. And I've had a lot of sweet,
yeah,
but here's a little bitter. And I remember feeling okay with that. It's okay. It's a little bitter right now. It's not forever. It's passing through. Everything is fleeting. And I remember I got into the hotel and we went into one of those hot springs that they have out there in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And I got a phone call and they said, hey, Mel, something's happened. We don't know what, it doesn't matter, but you've got the gig. And it was this incredible job with with Laurie Metcalf and Alex Borstein and Niecy Nash and just these incredible showrunners and writers. And it was this really, dark and hilarious thing. And I was
yeah,
so excited to be part of it. And that first month, I mean, the first year of doing the show, we lived in a hotel in Pasadena, because we had to kind of get money together and save up so that we could, and then finally we did. And then I was like, let's have some babies and let's get married. We did, you know what I mean? And for some reason that stuck. That was the thing that changed everything.
yeah,
And then, it was offers. And I mean, which is, man, you know how it is. To get an offer is just such a great thing, especially for somebody
yeah,
who's just auditioned their entire, you know what I mean?
yeah,
But it's a double-edged sword, as you know. You got to show up on the day and know the thing. I mean, it's like
yeah.
the first day is
I did
so.
something
Yeah,
recently. It was an offer, and I showed up on set, and it was a great role, a really great project. And then I got there, and I found myself feeling really anxious because I didn't have to prove that I can do this one, and I
right.
was so scared that I was going to let them down, and it worked out fine. But Yeah,
So that's
it's a weird transition, but I'm grateful too because I don't know if you know this. My grandpa is Barry Corbin. He was in
yeah,
Northern Exposure, Lonesome Dove,
yeah.
Urban Cowboy,
Oh, yeah.
and he had a similar story. He was in New York for 10 years, nothing. He did some off Broadway stuff, did some radio plays,
Yeah.
things like that. Then moved from New York to L.A. Again, nothing. And then the year he turned 40, he booked. So he'd been doing it for 20 years, pursuing it.
Right.
He was so poor, like he likes to tell this story that he would go buy a hot dog in New York and cut it into thirds and have one third for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Um, and he he ended up moving out there when he was 40. After 10 years of being in LA, he booked Urban Cowboy, Stir Crazy, and Any Which Way You Can with Clint
All
Eastwood.
right. I got to look up Barry Corbin now.
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah. You'll
I got
recognize him. He's a cowboy actor. Like he has like a ton of credits. He's always working. But
But
um
and that's the wonderful thing about, like, I think as a character actor. Oh yeah. I love Barry Corbin.
yeah,
He's your grandpa?
he is. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, he's amazing, man.
I remember saying like because I started acting at 6 and fell in love with
Oh
it
wow.
immediately and was like, this is
Yeah.
all I want to do. Um and wasn't able to, provide for me and my family until 2 or 3 years ago. And I'm 34 now. So it was like a long time coming. But I
Yeah.
always told myself like I'm if I make it before I'm 40, if I can get my first movie before I'm 40, like Manpaul was,
Yes.
then I'll be happy. Like that's my goal. So I definitely like I didn't have the expectations of it happening overnight, but it didn't make
Yes.
it any easier at times. But
It's hard, man. It's hard to
yeah,
be told no
yeah,
so
over and
much.
over. Yeah.
It has to be, it has to, it does something to you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It can't,
So
you know?
my grandpa's favorite quote is you've got to have the hopefully I don't butcher it. You've got to have the vulnerability you've got to have the hide of a rhinoceros and the vulnerability of a baby to make it in this
And
industry.
how, and that learning that is,
Yeah.
that's the thing. And how, us as sensitive people, as people, you know what I mean? How do you kind of get through? I mean, I mean, I love that saying because it
Yeah.
is, and it's that dichotomy that like is,
Yeah.
it's that rhinoceros skin is really,
Yeah.
it's hard to grow sometimes,
Yeah. But like anything, like getting calloused hands, you got to work. You got to work
That's
for
right.
that rhinoceros skin, and it's taken a long time, but I feel like I'm kind of finally settling into a place of with that experience, you just kind of one what people say about you or when people don't think you're right for the job doesn't affect you as much.
No,
Um,
not at all. Yeah.
you see the way your kids look at you, you see the way your wife looks at you. Like you don't care what other people think at that point.
No.
And
I
then
was gonna say,
also
I think that comes with having kids. You
yeah,
give less shits. You just kind of give less shits, you know what I mean? Like, you
yeah,
have really important things you're handling, like lives, you
yeah,
know what I mean? Like, little lives, and, like, everything else seems kind of, like, a little trivial, you
yeah.
know?
It really
Yeah,
does.
yeah,
I don't want to keep you too long, but before I let you go, I do want to mention or talk a little bit about Last Man on Earth because
yeah.
it's one of my all-time favorite TV comedies.
Oh, man.
You're a huge reason for that. My wife and I would watch that every week, like the night that it aired. We're on a rewatch of it now. Actually, we just started rewatching, and it's one of those shows that like I can't get enough of. But your character I really resonated with, and I see, especially after having this conversation, a lot of you in your character, in the sense of like really empathetic, really loving, and like can see the good even when people like Tandy are doing these awful things at times. Um, but also like a lot of insecurities and a lot of anxiety.
Yes.
And
Oh, man.
I'm curious because for I think that's one thing that again that this industry can really teach you so much about yourself, especially when you get that right role that's like
Yeah,
yours. Um,
yeah,
there's certain things that you can discover and it helps you build confidence. That the on the chosen, I've learned so much about myself and the way I've viewed my body over the years and my disability, and I'm in such a healthier mindset regarding all of that. because of that character, because of little James, I've
Yes.
grown to love myself more and understand myself on a deeper level. Um, did you experience that a little bit through
Oh
that
my goodness.
character?
Oh
And if
yeah.
so, what were the things that you
Well,
discovered?
the way that came about was, and like I said, I always, I've always said I kind of say yes to things. And there was this thing where, it was called The Watch. It was earlier called the Neighborhood Watch, but then it turns into The Watch. And it was a movie, and it was, I remember the casting director saying, "I can't think of anybody else but Mel." But here's the thing: like, he doesn't say anything the entire movie. He doesn't say anything. He's in the movie a ton, you know, and he's Will Forte's partner. You know what I mean? And they're just in the movie throughout, but he doesn't say anything. And I remember thinking, yeah, I want to do that. Like, how awesome is that? And the great thing about saying yes to that, because I think an ego could come into play, and be like, "No, I'm not doing that shit." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And I don't say anything. But the great thing about saying yes was I met Will, and me and Will had a lot of kind of off days, and we would hang out and we'd, just have fun, man. Will's this just incredible, incredibly beautiful man. You know what I mean? Such a kind human being.
it shows for sure.
And oh man, he really is. He's the real deal. And so we just go mess around. And I think we really got to know each other. And then he was creating this thing with Phil Lord and Chris Miller. And he said, "Mel," he said, "listen, I want you to do this." He was like, "But I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to be you. Just you. The guy that hangs out with me and we talk and stuff like that. Just be that guy." He was like, "Can you do that?" And I was like, "Dude, I'm me. Yeah, I can be me." You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
but I think actually that's one of the hardest things for people to do.
yeah,
And it was so wonderful because I feel like, man, it was just great. And it did teach me so much about myself. And also because you had this sounding board with the writers who really got to know me really, really well. You know what I mean?
hmm,
And would write, were so perceptive, and were able to write for me in a way that, made me have this. It was like discoveries of my own about
yeah,
myself. And it was a really wonderful experience, and the cast were amazing. And I mean, like, I got to make out with Mary Steenburgen and January Jones and Cleopatra Coleman and every girl. You know what I mean? Like, it was well, but it was great, and it was and later on that day, and it was a lot about me being heavy. You know,
yeah,
and later on that year, I did a film with a friend called Fat. That was all about, emotional eating and weight stuff. I mean, it just led to, yeah. I mean, God knows what He's doing. Perfect time,
yeah,
right when it's supposed to happen. And yeah, it's one of the greatest time. I mean, a lot of work because it's 7 people in the cast, and you're
yeah,
there every day, all the time. But it was one of those things that you were talking about with your job. Like, we became a family,
yeah.
and I still love them so much, you
That's
know?
so cool. What
Yeah.
was is there anything, and this is totally, I never do this. This is totally off of the whole vulnerable conversation thing. But since I am such a fan of Last Man on Earth, can you give any insight on like what could have happened if the show
Oh,
continued that
man.
like like what
There's been so many I've heard, Will would really at one point really would I think he wanted to do a movie. You know what I
mm,
mean? What happened was we just the numbers weren't there. And that's been a trend for me is I've always I've always done things that have been critically really well received, but the audience is kind of like, generally it's definitely like a pocket audience, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
it's really great for that group of people, but it's not gigantic, like, blockbustery stuff.
yeah, yeah,
And so, fourth season came around and the numbers weren't there and they were just like, we're going to pull the plug. And they pulled the plug like right when it was like this whole, they had this whole story that was going to be really
yeah.
incredible,
Pretty big cliffhanger.
huge cliffhanger. And yeah, and I think a lot of people have, you go to the message boards and you talk to people and people are always asking that question. I don't know. I think maybe, I mean, look, it was so much work because Will was doing everything.
Yeah,
And honestly, I don't think it was very good for his health. And he'll admit that. And he said it before too. And so I don't know. I think, I'd love to do a movie someday,
yeah.
and I think everybody else would too. And
Well,
we've all talked about it. And maybe, I don't
yeah.
know.
I really do hope our paths cross on a project
Me
one
too,
of these
Jordan.
days. And
Yeah,
either way, let's stay in touch. Before you go though, can you promote or plug any projects you have coming up or that you want to, put out there?
sure. So I let's see. Netflix, the 2025 is Falcon. It's coming out. It's a limited series and incredible cast. And it's about this. It's a whodunit at the White House, like a clue. And it's just amazing. They rebuilt the White House on these 6 sound stages I mean, it's just nuts. And then I just did a movie called Sarah's Oil with my good buddy who I've known for like 22 years, Zachary Levi. And so
Yeah.
we're partners in that. So yeah, those are the 2 things. And they're both, great projects. And I'm really excited to see what they do with them. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I
And
can't wait
then,
to see them too.
stuff's in the works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait. And you're welcome on anytime. And
Oh, Jordan, thank you,
yeah,
man.
of course.
Yeah, let's
Thank
keep in
you.
touch for sure. This was nice.
Yeah.
Off the record
Likewise.
or on the record,
Yeah. Either
whatever.
way. Yeah. Yeah.
Very nice. I
No, I,
appreciate it.
I love this. I'm always down for a good, vulnerable conversation. So anytime.